Hey, it's Millie, and welcome to the Generalist World podcast. This is a show where I interview people from the Generalist World community, and we talk things like the future of work, careers, predictions, their hot takes, and really understand what their squealy careers have looked like. So if you're a generalist who feels like they're living in a specialized world, this is the podcast for you.
Hey, John.
Hi, Millie. How are you?
So good. I'm so excited to do this very spontaneous podcast. I want to give a little context to the listeners of how this came about. I posted on LinkedIn yesterday, which would be a shock to absolutely nobody that happened. And John commented on that post, and it started a little thread between us. And we thought, you know what? Why don't we just go and explore this live on a podcast? And what I can do is I can give a little bit of context to that post, and then let's just see where this goes. However, before we do that, I'd love to give people a little bit of a flavor, a bit of an idea of who they're going to be listening to for the next half an hour. And so if someone is like, am I going to tune in? Am I going to listen? Why should someone pause whatever else they're doing and tune in to us for the next, say, 30 minutes?
Well, as your LinkedIn post said, it's very spicy topic. So, that's why it's very spicy.
Very spicy.
So I'm Jon Saltzman. If you looked at me on LinkedIn, you'd say, oh, this guy's a techie. We don't want to talk to him. He's not interesting. But the truth of the matter is I'm a generalist at heart. I'm like, not the OG generalist, but like I've been thinking I was this for a long time. So my LinkedIn doesn't really fit my kind of face and my life and my persona. And I'm also not old, but not young. I'm in that middle age area. And when you posted about going back to the 90s, I was like, well, yes, I lived through those, and the 80s as well. And these were good times. But seeing how the world is changing with what's going on with AI and everything, I've lived through technology, organizational, societal changes as well, like analog to digital conversion. And it's just an area of intense interest for me. It's my favorite thing when you see how these things interact and how technology and society change over time. So I had to respond. I was like, oh my gosh, she posted the cool thing. I have to talk. Let's do it.
That is one heck of a way to set the people up. I'm sure whatever they're doing, even if they're washing the dishes or they're going for a walk, they've just turned the volume up. So context. Yesterday, I posted, I believe the headline was something like, this is so spicy, I don't even want to say it out loud, because I just had a spidey sense that I was going to get like a lot of pushback because what is she saying about we're going to be? Because I think the world is so like forward. Let's keep looking forward. And my sense is, the spicy take is that we're going to be going back to the 90s, as you alluded to. And what do I mean by that? What we're seeing is a complete economic and societal and shift in the way that we work. Everyone feels it. This won't be news to anyone. And so I've been thinking very, very deeply about this of like, okay, so what does the world look like when AI really integrates? I think we've been on the teetering edge of it for maybe a year or two now, and it's been, oh, this is cute. This is a cute accessory. Like, oh, this is kind of fun. However, during this week, I asked Claude, basically I was trying to figure something out, and Claude was like, you could do this and this and this. And I said, oh, could you just do it for me? And then I sat back, took my hands off the keyboard, and Claude opened a browser and did the thing. And it was the moment in my life when I was like, not that it's all over, because we're not talking doomsday, like, oh, we're all cooked kind of thing. But I'm like, wow, it is over in some degree. And then I got really obsessed with the thought, okay, if Claude is now able to go in and take over my browser, I mean, it's January 2026, like what is it going to be like in January 2027? And also, what is the world going to be like? And this is where I got this like sense of, I wonder if we're going to be going back, if the internet era of careers is going to be massively disrupted, changing. If you're listening to this, you probably have an internet era career. If you work on the internet, this is you, this is us, we're all talking about the same thing. And so my spicy take was that we're going to be leveraging AI. That's one big thing, but there's going to be a big push away from working in these giant corporations and being like a cog in a machine. And there's going to be a big push toward entrepreneurship, small teams, and specifically back to the 90s, in-person things. And I use the example of like a couple of friends opening a bookshop, someone starting a cafe, parents starting a forest school out of necessity. And all of these things, the key, I think, is necessity. And I'm going to pause it there because I know that you have been thinking about this a lot. Where does this land for you, and what is your take?
Well, we all know that when Millie has a spicy idea, she's usually onto something pretty cool. Again, I got really excited when I saw what you posted. But because my story is a bit of a winding one, it's too long to talk about in a podcast. But the short version of it is that about a year, just over a year ago, I made a major change in my life because I recognized that this trend was upon us. I was working in tech. I was working on implementing AI on a platform for technology. And you know, it's like all technology advancements and how they affect society. I'm a student of history. I like to read like old, musty books. I'm recently moving and it's like, I said, whose idea was it to buy all these books anyway? Because it's like, I just have too many books. But there's a lot of good stuff in those, the voices from the past. I actually laughed when I said it would be like the 90s because, again, I was sort of thinking like, well, what was it like in, you know, the 80s and even earlier than that, right? I mean, society has changed a lot from the industrial age to kind of the service economy to the knowledge economy and so forth. And each time society has changed, I think it causes people to question these things. For example, in the industrial era, when the automation of the building of vehicles on the construction lines, right, in factories, back in those days when that happened, this actually caused, at that time, what was sort of some negative things like structural unemployment because people were displaced by the technology and they could not find another job to do immediately. Some people just retired. Some people did pivot into new careers. By the way, I'm talking about a few things that are like, seem like downers, but the thing is we can look back on this history and like take this opportunity to do it differently this time. Every technology or change that has come that I've seen in my lifetime, you could look at it as like, oh my gosh, this is going to replace me. What am I going to do? Or you could look at it as, what can I learn from this technology change? What can I see that's real about it? How can I see through the sort of the fog of vaporware and things like that about what is real and what isn't? You know, the robots haven't taken over yet, although they're getting awfully close. But, you know, we're not quite there yet. But what is the meaningful change? And Millie, I think you've been seeing a lot of this, like in what you've been doing. You talk a little bit about more about the projects you've been vibe coding and that experience, because I think people haven't totally realized yet, like, this is here now. And before that, I was just going to say, was that the key moment that you had when that spurred this post, when you had that aha moment? Like, oh, AI is really here and it's going to, it has changed our lives. Was that moment for you? Mine was in September of last year. So I'm curious about the timing too.
I think I've been feeling it for a year or so, but it's in the last few months that I felt almost like this wave of, no, we're in it now. We're not talking about a future event. We're in it now. It's an interesting thought experiment to be like, Millie, you've got a great business. You love the work that you do at Generalist World. Isn't that a distraction that you're out here vibe coding a cycle syncing app so you can predict when your period's going to be there and so you can plan your work around it? Or the one I did a couple of weeks ago, which went bananas, was so simple. Find a time to meet across different time zones. Now, there's a few things to pull on here. The first is, why those apps? Why did I even bother building them? And there's two reasons. The first is I needed it. So I was like, oh man, I'm in New Zealand at the moment. We're like in the future. I'm like plus 18 hours to some places in America, and my brain simply does not function. I'm good at other things. I'm not good at working out time zones, and I like got really tired of being on that world time buddy, trying to be like, like squinting, like, okay, so when? So I was like, oh, surely and this is the question, if you ever say to yourself, surely this should be easier, That's an app. Simply that. And so we'll take I think the URL is letsfindatime.app. And the process of that was realizing it was very annoying to schedule a time, and then saying, okay, well, can I solve this? Can I solve this problem for me? And there's a lesson in, if you are finding something really annoying, I guarantee others are too. And I think the skill that people are missing, or the skill that's going to be really valued, is not even necessarily the building of it, because I built that app in like a couple of hours, like on Lovable. It was wild. It's going to be in the communicating of it. And I think this is like getting into like the human skills of like when the building, and you're a data guy, so I'm sure you've got some backing on this. But yeah, it's like, why would I bother wasting my time publishing these apps? I don't need to make money from them or want to make money. I am purely doing it to build the muscle of building and communicating. And when you start to publish these things, I think there's also like it's a part of your reputation, I guess, kind of like the personal brand, where it's like, oh, okay, so Millie, she's thinking about how to solve problems, even if they're teeny tiny. So I think that's where I got to, and I'm curious what your September moment was. What happened then?
September for me was because I was on the early cusp of this, because I was working in a company in Silicon Valley, like, so I got exposed to it fairly early. The leader of that company was very into this, like, we need to jump on this and build this into our product. And, there was some hype of it, but there was also some like, what can we really do with this technology, and how will it fundamentally change what we're building as a company? And so, like, for me, September was after I had left that job, but I was also working with technology and the AI LLMs myself. And I started to realize how it was affecting my thinking, and that it had become more of a partner in the thinking and in the working and in the doing. The fact that you can sit on your phone and use something like Codex or Claude Code and build something while you're, sitting on your couch and not even in front of a computer is amazing. I would also say, as someone who has been a software engineer and did things the hard way, it's kind of funny. I had a manager one time, and he said, about a software application we were building, he said, I don't know what it is, and I don't know how it works, but it should be easy. And this was always the thing that people said. It's like, or you would give them a new application you'd built, and they'd look at it and they'd be like, why did this take you so long? Like, this looks so simple. I'm like, do you have any idea how much work it was under the covers? But what's great about this, I always said this, and software engineers generally say this, we're techies and we're nerds and things of this nature, but a lot of it is about problem solving. And by being able to make this technology, being able to make this capability more ubiquitous, it is giving people more agency, so that when they see something, there's a problem, there's a hole, instead of going, I need to go hire a programmer, I need to go pay a software engineer, and I need to go pay somebody else, maybe I could just go make the thing that I want and then use it. Which, at the end of the day, if we think back to the first tools that man ever created, man and women, cave women and cavemen, right? It was like, we need something to mash this thing together. How about we use a rock? Or we need something sharp, or we need to make fire to stay warm. We make tools and technology so we can use them to make our lives better. That's fundamentally what technology has always been about, basically. But for me, I had that similar moment. This is why when you said spicy, because if you play this out, this is really, I had a sabbatical for about the last year. And when you really play that out, what you start to see is, the consequences, the impacts that this can have on society go much further than even an internet era type job. Yes, those are at risk, but so are traditional jobs, so are traditional institutions being disrupted by this technology. There's the people that invented the terms creative destruction or creative disruption. There really is something to that, right? This is fundamentally affecting our society. And even though we're not totally there yet, the speed that we're going at and what it can already do, that's the most important thing. Look at this kind of technology with a grain of salt, but see what it can actually do. See how you can use it. And you might be surprised, as you have been, like, you might be surprised what you find.
Mm. And I'm curious, how do you see this shift, I don't even have the word for it, this enormous shift that we're all feeling? How do you see it impacting specifically generalists and people who have these squiggly careers?
Right. So one of the most interesting things is that if we look at again, putting on the historian hat a little bit, there's always this question of like, well, Peter Drucker was famous for talking about the knowledge economy and a post-capitalist world, famous business thinker, right? And when you think about like, well, if knowledge is built into the model, so to speak, I mean, it's fundamentally different than human knowledge because it's not human, but we have encoded a lot of our information and our wisdom and our knowledge into these models. And so it's there, it's different, but it's there. So then what happens when you say what comes next after the knowledge economy? Some people have said that the creative economy is what's next. But then look at the history of artists, the starving artists trying to survive, making a living all these years off of their art. Is that really where we will end up? And how much will the machines take over? But to your point, why is it that generalists may be more important now than ever? Maybe now is the time for the generalists, so to speak, is because the more capabilities that we have as individuals, the more different things, the more variety, the more diversity we have that we can do different things than we used to be able to do before. For example, companies recognize this, and my whole career as a techie, when I had specialist jobs like a data architect or this, people would always say, we don't need that anymore. And it's not strictly true, but I understand why you're saying that. And it's not that we don't need specialists. Specialists are still needed, but they're amplified, their capabilities amplified. Maybe we need less of them. And, that means it's like, well, then we still have humans here and they want to do something. Maybe this starts to open up more creativity, more different kinds of things. And this is where it gets into sort of what emerges after this. Maybe some of the stuff from post-capitalist. I say that, by the way, too. I'm curious on your take, because some of the ventures that you mentioned, they are more socially directed. They're more human focused, as you were saying. And I'm curious, like, why you felt that way about it. Why you weren't looking at it saying, I'm going to make the next Microsoft or the next Facebook or whatever. Like, why did you choose things like bookstores and cafes and forests? Those are very specific examples. I'm curious.
Well, I think probably a large part of it just comes down to personality and like character. And I think the thing that I value perhaps the most when it comes to work is freedom and enjoyment and just having an absolute blast at whatever I'm doing. And to me, I would take that every single day over making lots and lots of money and being miserable. And that's just been my take. I don't even think I could force myself into the other one. I'm just like, if I'm going to be spending all my days doing it, I've only got the one life. Like, as long as I'm making a decent living, my bills are paid, I get to travel, my family's taken care of, awesome. Like, so cool. And then if I can also, it's this like, oh yeah, this profit, passion, and purpose, this triangle that I've spent many years trying to figure out, like, what is the best kind of ladder of that. And I think where I come to is that we'll see. We're saying this again, January 2026, but the way I kind of think about it is that if I have a couple of sources, this is like, I guess, portfolio career 101, if I have a couple of sources of income that help me live well, do work that's meaningful, and help others, then I have more freedom to be able to play around with things like, I don't need to make money from the time planner app. It's just like, that can just be a service. That can just be a service to the world that the world gets because I think it's needed. Same with the period tracker. So I wonder if this rise of technology and this ability to do more in, say, less time will actually lead to more, say, things like volunteering, more social good. This is maybe the positive spin on it, but what do you think?
Well, so absolutely. I'd love to do a thought experiment with you for a minute. We have I think in our generalist group, we have a sort of running joke that many of us we don't talk about it, but it's there, which is that we'd all like to run off and sort of live in the forest and do our little cool creative things and live in our tiny homes and things of that nature, right? So the kind of thought experiment is, and you live on an island, so you've had to already deal with these practical concerns, right? But if we really wanted to do that, some might say this is sort of like a Star Trek future almost, right? Like a utopia. Utopias, that's a whole thing. I'm not suggesting that we're getting to a utopia yet. We're certainly far, far from it when you look at the reality of the world around us today. If you listen to somebody like Elon Musk talk about the future, it's hard to understand how what he's saying about what the future could be like has anything to do with where we are today. So there's a bit of a gap there. But we're going back to the kind of, living in the forest. The thought experiment is, if you really wanted that to be real, what would the world have to be like to make that a reality?
My sense, and this was maybe the quiet part that I didn't say out loud in the spicy post yesterday, was around that if we were to do, I think we've become accustomed, right? We've become accustomed to these, particularly if you work in tech, probably a big fat salary and a certain way of living. And with that, then, you've got likely a bigger mortgage, you've got more expenses. Like, living is expensive. And particularly when I speak to my US friends, I'm like, how much? Excuse me, are you guys okay? Like, it's shocking to me. And I think just for like context, one of the reasons that I've been able to bootstrap and self-fund Generalist World for so many years is because I've made the decision to live on this remote island where there is one shop and it closes at 5 p.m. every day and it's not open on a Sunday and there is nothing to buy. And I feel it like when I go into a city, I'm like, oh, spending. I can just tap. I don't even need a card. It's all digital. Yeah, the quiet part that I didn't say in the post is that I wonder if there will be, and perhaps even needs to be, a kind of economic reset of expectations. And I'd love your take from like the kind of North America side. But is it sustainable that people are like, I need to be making 300, 400, 500,000? You see these salaries going like wild on the internet. And is that sustainable? And also, do you need that if you're going to be living in your forest in your tiny home? What becomes the new normal?
So I'm going to purposely steer clear of the politics of it and stay more on the factual side. Absolutely, you're right. The cost of everything, there's something called Baumel's cost disease, which is a model of how costs continue to escalate. Definitely something, if you're curious, go Google that and read about it. But aside from the theory of it, yes, it feels like everything is getting more expensive. And at the end of the day, I would say that there's a lot of change happening in our society, both from the technology and from the politics and from how everything is changing, the climate is changing and how that's impacting us. I think it's right that the expense of living has gone up across the board. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down, but generally over time it feels like it's just going up and up and up and up and up. Also, when you take like traditional career concepts, right? For sure in the US, thinking back to the 20s, 30s, 40s, when people started a career, it was a career for life, right? One job, one career, one purpose for 40 years, and then you retire and you live in your house with your white picket fence and so on and live out the American dream, so to speak. I think that played out for some people, but I don't think that actually played out for everyone. I think it was a good dream. I think it was a nice dream. That's not to say that it's bad to dream, right? If we're being positive, it's good to dream about a positive future for everyone. And actually, I would go even further on this. If you look at a country like Japan and the salaryman positions, right? Where it's like you literally don't change jobs. Well, it's not like that as much anymore in Japan. People change jobs. So, I mean, something that seemed written in stone, this is part of our culture, never changes. It has been changing, right? I think that it's very difficult when things change in a way that directly affect what you're doing and what's your livelihood, especially when you're aging and you're getting older, because it's difficult to find your place in the world and do good work and do meaningful work. Even though I'm only middle-aged, I've already found that, and that's part of why I made a shift in my life. Before my own personality, my own self, I wanted to do good for the world, but I was like, I gotta pay my bills. I gotta earn enough money to survive, take care of my family, do all those things. I sort of stopped halfway through and went, wait a minute. I know I've had this backwards, but I'm going to flip that around for a minute. I'm going to start with trying to do good to help other people, the social work, those things. It's partly because it's me, but it's partly because of the times. This is an area where it needs the energy and the brain power and the excitement to try to solve these fundamental changes and problems. And not all of them problems, they're opportunities as well in how our society is changing. It's like Star Trek, in Star Trek, money isn't really a thing. There's endless abundance. There's quote unquote no war or anything like that. Okay, seems very far away, right? But at some point, if we want to even have any semblance of that now, we have to think about how do we take practical action today, right? So that we can get to that tomorrow that we're looking for. So my opinion on it is that there is practical work to do today. A lot of it is different work than we were doing before. I would encourage people to float lightly over this. Like I know so many people right now and I'm even technically unemployed in the traditional sense. I know so many people that have been impacted by this, and the weight of the bills and taking care of your kids and taking care of your family is just crushing their souls. But like structural unemployment, there are other things, forced entrepreneurship. These societal changes, they're not new things that they've happened before. If we learn from that, what we can see is that actually one of the most interesting ones, and you don't think about this a lot, but the economics of refugee camps. Refugees are in the worst possible situation of all of us. They've lost everything, and they basically have been displaced, that have nothing potentially, right? But even in that sense, there are lots of studies that show that economies form, people do things like trade and barter, and it's like you look at what you have with your hands. What can we do together? Like, how can we survive together? It's a sort of forcing function to push people together. So this is, again, not a new thing per se, but it's new to all of us because we haven't experienced that yet. We grew up in the sort of old way of doing careers and the old way of thinking of, you get to this age, you buy a house, you do this, you do that. But then especially for newer generations, that roadmap doesn't apply anymore. There's a saying, it's often misattributed to Einstein or Stephen Hawking, but that true intelligence is adaptation. If you can float lightly and be creative, work with the people around you in your local community, reconnect. There's a great book that has come up recently again. It's been out for a long time called Bowling Alone. I forget the author's name right now, but the author basically wrote this around, I think it was the 50s possibly, when television was really hitting mass penetration in the US. And it was talking about the loss of bowling clubs. People used to come together and do social activities, and something of value was lost because people were sitting inside watching TV instead of talking to each other. And this talk goes towards the diffusion of technology and innovation through society and how we react to it. But anyways, so I hope this gives some of the color to, this isn't unprecedented. It's how we react to it. And for what it's worth, I'm all over tiny house villages and experimentation. We're in an era of small experiments. You don't necessarily have to open a cafe to do a small experiment. We had Anne LeCure, I think was her name, right? That came and talked about tiny experiments. This is a time, especially if you aren't employed, this is a time to experiment. And we have technology available to us for $20 a month that can help us do that exploration and that experimentation. And we can get together with other humans and do things. And that's the part that's got me excited, is actually the driving together part and us figuring out and working together on these things. This is something I think we've been missing.
100%. And to give a plug, I think this is where if you find your people, if you find your communities, if you're a generalist, maybe that's Generalist World, maybe there's many, many communities. I I just think this is going to be so key when it's like when we are going through these really tumultuous. So right now, to me, it feels like we're in a tumultuous time. We're in the washing machine and we're all getting, thrown around a little bit. But if you have other people like you can come out of the washing machine with and go and dry in the sun for a bit and be like, okay, where are we at? What are we doing? Like, for example, I know that Simran in our community has like a tiny experiments channel where it's just like dedicated to like, if you want to try something. And I think this is such a fantastic message for people to take away because I know it can be a little bit paralyzing when you're like, oh man, everything I thought was true is just blown up in the air. So now what? And it can feel really terrifying to have this completely radical change of like, all right, now I'm going to pivot to something completely different. But if you can take these tiny steps and do these tiny experiments, particularly if you can do it in a community that's genuine and supportive, I think that's really sound advice.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that. And also, it comes down to something. Somebody says this quote to me often. My mother. She says to me, if you look around you, if it's one thing if you're having a rough time of it by yourself and you're isolated, but if you look around you and you see that everyone is going through the same thing that you are, then you're not alone. And that's when you know that something big is changing in our society. So to your point, I agree too. That is really great advice. I don't think it's any mistake that online communities seem, at least anecdotally to me, have grown in leaps and bounds over the last few years as people are reconnecting again. My hope for the future is that we do this reconnection and then we hold on to that for the long term and we don't ever really let it happen again. That would be a great future where humans are reconnected with each other and the machines are doing the annoying work like folding my laundry and stuff like that. The stuff I don't really want to do. I mean, it's okay. We can let them do it. But, you get my point, I think.
Yeah. Is there anything else, Jon, that you're like, oh, I really wish I had a chance to speak to this while I've got the mic and everyone is tuned in? Anything I haven't asked you?
Yeah, I would say one thing, and it's about what we value as humans. I think when big technology changes come up, they are disruptive. And I think that especially AI, maybe even more than any other technology before, because it feels in so many ways like it replaces us as humans. That's a decision. That's a personal decision to decide whether you want to let it replace you as a person or not. I'm not saying that it won't, right? Technology will replace people. It has been. I mean, I hate to say it, but I'm partly responsible. You can all send your hate mail to me, but I didn't invent AI, just for what it's worth. But, as a technologist, I've been part of this trend, and I've always been very aware of the fact that we are automating work that people would do. But good technologists, and good capitalists for that matter, don't just worry about the technology for the sake of the technology or the money for the sake of money, right? I worked for a Japanese company that was a very well-known company, and the original founder of it said the purpose of us as industrialists in that company was genuinely to make life better for people. A little profit, a good profit, that's not bad. Where we're at from a perspective of value, and when I say value, I mean value multiple ways. Economic value, the values that we hold as human beings, as people, the value that we create and put out into the world and on offer. AI is the latest thing. I really like to think of it like a mirror. We're looking into this mirror, and on the other side, we see this digital version of ourselves, and we're wondering, like, what does this mean for the long run? I think it's asking us, it's prompting us. The AI is prompting us to think about what we value as humans. But values and there's another word I learned recently. One of my friends told me this. Values and valences. Valences are an interesting thing. It's another thing from research. Valences are values with a directional energy or component behind them. So it's not just I value this or I value that, but for example, a positive thing and energy behind it to move in a direction, right? So I think that while we're thinking about what we value as humans, the other part comes from action. and the directionality of supporting those things. Millie, I'm valuing getting to sit here and speak with you and be heard by all these people out there in the world. Let's connect. Let's value each other, and let's value the time and the energy and the things that we can do together. And let's go build a positive future for people. Let's go build those little tools. And hey, maybe along the way, we'll make money too. Maybe we won't need money where we're going. Boy, wouldn't that be nice? Or maybe we just need less of it. I think that's a pretty cool future.
I'm fired up. That's awesome. And
spicy, right? Spicy.
I'm so excited to publish this and have like a discussion going and see what's landed, where the pushback is, where we have other perspectives on this. So, Jon, thank you so much for your time. This has been fantastic. And thanks for being a part of GW as well.
Thank you for starting GW. You did the most important part. You made the community, and I'm happy to be a member. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Jon.